Thank you, Fred. Our speaker, we've changed the format a little bit this year, as some of you will notice if you were with us last year. We have a guest speaker, and a very special guest speaker right from within our own community. That speaker today is nationally award-winning author and poet, Kathy Brodsky. Kathy has been a psychotherapist for over 40 years, and as a licensed clinical social worker, she's had her own private practice since 1987. Kathy is the author of 7 books, including the recently published Stover, about a pig with a secret life. And by the way, you have copies of some of those books on your tables. Please don't take those with you. Those are for kids at Child Health Services. However, the folks at Barnes & Noble have very kindly set up a table outside, and after the event concludes this morning, you're more than welcome to go out and pick up copies of Kathy's books that are all on sale, and Kathy would be delighted to autograph them for you. Kathy's first children's book, My Bent Tree, celebrates the love and encouragement her mother gave her during her childhood battle with polio. In that book, she discusses what parents can do to help their children triumph over difficulties they encounter growing up. My Bent Tree has been made into a book in Braille and a talking book by the Perkins School for the Blind. Kathy's newest book, A Horse Named Special, due out later this year, is about a racehorse who can no longer run and becomes a therapeutic riding horse. Kathy sits on the board of directors of the Independent Publishers of New England. She's a member of the New Hampshire Writers Project. Because of her counseling expertise in working with relationships, she's been interviewed by and quoted in the Wall Street Journal. Kathy has spoken to school children and teachers groups all over New England. For those of you who know Kathy, you know how infectious her enthusiasm is. And if you saw John Clayton's column in the Union Leader last week, you know that she is not shy. As Pam Butzelis says on the back of one of Kathy's books, Kathy takes note of the many moments in each of our lives, from the mundane to the extraordinary, and finds the universal truth in each, relating it in ways that are often humorous and always sincere. You will find yourself nodding in agreement, recognizing that particular moment from your very own life, and marveling that Kathy somehow knew about it. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Brodsky.
Wow, look at all these people. Thank you, Norm, for that terrific introduction. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. You know, I see a lot of friendly faces. I'd like to start off by talking about my little dog, Sophie. Sophie is a Cocker Spaniel. She came to me, there's Sophie's picture over there if you want to see how cute she is. Sophie came to me 2 years ago. Around this time, it was Mother's Day, and she's now 9. She was 7 when she came. Sophie didn't know how to play. She grew up in a family where no one paid attention to her. It was as if she didn't matter. And my friend Karen Smith at Pedigree calls that benign neglect. Nobody really cared about her. So when I would throw a ball, Sophie would look at me as if to say, "What's that? I don't even know what that is." And then in obedience class, Karen said, "Okay, everybody get a tug toy." You know, those are the things where the dog holds one end and you hold the other, and the dog is supposed to, then let go when you say it. Well, I'm back and forth with this tug toy, and Sophie is just sitting there because it was like this is nothing to her. Also, when no one pays attention to you, you might develop some bad habits. Unfortunately, Sophie came with some bad habits. I'm still working on those today. You see, she likes peppermint candies, or really any kind of candy. And she'll rip open a pocket or anything to get to one of those candies. I have repaired so many things and had to have gotten rid of so many things because of Sophie and her bad habits. It's the same with people. If no one pays attention to us, we don't feel as if we matter. At Child Health Services, they really make everybody, you know, as Fred said, they make people feel welcome and they feel that they matter. And that's so important. You know, as a therapist, when you help the parents, then you're helping the family, you're helping the kids too. I go back with Child Health Services many, many years. When Judith Jolton first asked me to speak, she didn't even know I had a connection to Child Health Services. She knew mainly about my books. But I knew its founder, Selma Deitch. Selma was, all of those who knew her knew that she was tough and she was also fair. And the agency is the strong way it is today because of Selma. I'm trying to stand up straight. Okay. I came to Manchester as a clinical social worker in 1970. I started working at a little place called the Community Guidance Center. That was a place that was the precursor of the Greater Manchester Mental Health Center. Selma had found Nick Vervin, a psychologist who worked at the Judge Baker Clinic in Boston in the late 60s. Selma found him specifically to come to Manchester to start a mental health center. As a clinical social worker, people come to me with all sorts of problems. As Fred said, I've been doing this for over 40 years, so there have been a lot of histories that I get from people. And often I'll hear really, really, really tough backgrounds, and I'll say to people, considering that really tough background, how did you turn out as well as you did? And I'll hear things like, because you always need at least one person to care about you. And I'll hear things like, it was my aunt, it was my next door neighbor, it was my best friend's mother, it was the school librarian, it was the public librarian, it was my teacher. And I know in the case of Child Health Services, it would be Child Health Services. These would be the clients of Child Health Services. So I'd like to read recite a few lines from my poem, An Anachronism. As children, we're subjected to our families of origin. We're born, grow up, that's our job. At times it's hard to grin. We watch and learn whatever we need to get out of there alive. Happily, most of us do just fine. We bring along skills to survive. That's what we all go through, and if the family doesn't have the stuff, society pays for it later. So Child Health Services is doing an incredible job with this. That poem is in my book, Moments in Our Lives. So now what I'd like to do is really talk about my writing. I go to schools, and one day in a school, I said to the kids, how many of you think a book drops from the sky? And one little boy raised his hand, I do. Well, that's really not how it happens. So I'd like to tell you how my books come into being. The backstory of it is how, and whenever you think of, look over there, my son Jeff is very busy with the computer, and you can see pictures every once in a while. The backstory of how I started writing was that I started 10 years ago, actually. My mother had her 90th birthday, and if she were alive today, she would be 100. I put a little poem in with a family invitation, and I said, this is fun. And as I tell kids in school, you have to write what you know. So my very first poem was about swimming, because I try to swim every day. And the second one was called Ode to My Suit. And that's about how bathing suits fade and get saggy. I can see you all relate to that. Then I realized that I had so many stories, so many things that I could write about, with thousands of clients and so many years over working for the school department and the Elliott Hospital and the Mental Health Center and Child and Family Services. And in my private practice, I had so many stories. So what I did was I really realized that I could turn a lot of this into poems. And you know, there are commonalities that we all go through. We think we're so special, but honestly, we're not. We really go through the same stuff. As a matter of fact, my book, Moments in Our Lives, was originally called Basic Stuff from Birth on Up, but I changed it. I thought this sounded a little more sophisticated. When I started to do Moments in Our Lives, what I did was I took a lot of the things that I said to clients that were metaphors, and I put them into poems. And before that, and actually after I did that, I worked with Julia DiStefano. Julia helped me edit my books, and what we did with Moments in Our Lives, there were 65 poems that came out of it. But we sat every week for about an hour and a half, for a year and a half, right around the corner from the pool at Southern New Hampshire University, and we sat on the hard floor, and we dissected almost all of my poems. So I would sit with Julia, and we would go over the poems, and then I would go back, and I would retype them, and then I'd go back, and we would change them. Sometimes I had 3 and 4 times of corrections. There were some that I never changed at all. And then I decided that I needed to have pictures, and I didn't know how I would do that, but Kathy McGreevy, who's a photographer, worked with me, so we decided that I would have the poems on one side of the page and pictures on the other. And then my son Greg and I sat in my family room, and we took all the poems and we lined them up kind of chronologically from wall to wall in different rows, and that's how the book started. Now, as I told you, I use a lot of metaphors with my clients, and this is a poem from Moments in Our Lives, and it's an example of one of the metaphors. It's called, and I used to say this to clients all the time, but then for the book I turned it into a poem. It's called, and you can relate to this, Cars Are Smarter Than We Are. Cars are smarter than we are. They stop when the tank is on E. We're often stressed and continue until we've no sense of who we should be. Women are worst in this area. They try to be too many things. Little by little, they're slipping away. They can't see what all of this brings. If you try to ask them a favor, they often will bite off your nose. I'm busy, they say. Would you please go away? Later on, I'll be washing your clothes. Women and men, please listen. It's time to do something for you. A little time off doesn't mean you're a sloth. It will help, and here's what you do. The key to good health is balance. In nature, it works 'cause it's so. Balance work, home, and play. Just do it your way. You'll feel better when you learn to say no. So I wrote Moments in Our Lives, and it came out in 2004, and I had no idea I would write another book. But as I tell the kids in school all the time, you gotta really pay attention what you hear and what you see. So, one day I was walking my dog Callie. Callie was a huge French Mastiff, a dog de Bordeaux with a 23-inch neck. And I used to walk Callie all the time. And I was walking along my usual road every day, and it was April, so the leaves weren't out on the trees yet. And I said, that tree is crooked. I said, oh, that tree is crooked. And the next day, the first 4 lines, you know, I kind of, very often I'll go to meetings even, and the speaker will be talking, and I'll write a poem, kind of what the person is talking about in a rhyme. Well, that's what I did all the way home. One day I was walking and was so surprised I spotted a bent pine beside the straight guys. Didn't say exactly that way, but very close to it. Now the trouble is when you think of something and you're not with pencil and paper, you have to repeat it all the way home. So I'm mumbling all the way home. One day I was walking. And then, Jeff, the next slide. I don't know how well you can see this. On the very top left-hand corner is the scrap piece of paper that I wrote it on. And that sat on my counter. It was a little Post-it note. And that sat on my counter for a week. And then all of the rest of those notes were scrap pieces of paper, and I wrote the whole rest of it the following week. And then I realized that, oh, sorry, Jeff, next one. Thanks. And then I put it into 2 columns. All of my books have 2 columns, so all of my books are actually one long poem, so it's 2 columns. And then I said to myself, this is a picture book. I don't know how to find an illustrator. Well, I was very lucky because I was taking Argentine tango lessons here in Manchester. And Cameron Bennett, the tango instructor, told me he was an artist. So, I couldn't believe it. So Cameron and I have been working together ever since. And I showed him the poem, and I explained to him that I needed a happy tree. So he gave me a happy tree, and he worked on the arms, and the tree has a big smile and everything. And I want to show you what he does. So, as I told you, there are 2 columns, and there are 4 lines in each section. And then, Jeff, show the next slide. So what Cameron does, I know you can't see these well, he makes a little thumbnail sketch of each of the 4 groupings. And that becomes either a whole page or part of a page of a book. And then Cameron makes a larger sketch. There's one larger sketch. That's the top of the tree. You can see how happy he is. And then the next sketch, and that's how he paints. All of my pictures are all of my books, the pictures are painted by Cameron. They're not computer generated, they're all painted. And then the last slide shows how it looks in the book. So that's kind of how My Bent Tree came into being. When I did My Bent Tree, I had no idea there would be more books. But when there were more books, I said to Cameron, we got to kind of have a theme. All the books will stand alone, but they got to have a theme. So in all of my books, somewhere in the book, maybe not on the cover, but somewhere, you'll see a little girl with red hair, a red bird, and a bent tree. And and you can see right here, the little girl with red hair, the bent tree, and the red bird. And Cameron said to me, now, most people don't know this, but Cameron said to me, what should we call the little girl? See, most of you don't know that. And I said, BB. He said, why BB? I said, it stands for Brodsky and Bennett. So that's what the little girl's name is. And also, there are always questions in the back of my books because they lead to further discussion. There's always an author's note that tells how the book came into being. And they all have happy endings because I like happy endings. You know, when you write your own stuff, you can make anything up. So a few months later, I was at a friend's house. It was a snowy day, and she had some envelopes, it doesn't matter. And so she had them to mail. And I said, I'll mail them for you. And she said this sentence, they'll be very happy. Did everybody get that? They'll be very happy. At least that's what I heard. Now, she didn't remember that, but I certainly did. And 4 nights later, at midnight, the Inside Story was born. And there it is, the girl with red hair, the bent tree, and the red bird. And this is a book about change. It's also about recycling, but it's really about change. On the end pages, when you open it up, it says, for everyone who has endured difficult times and grown stronger, this is for you. And just the other day, I got an email on Sunday night. I got an email from a principal in Ontario, Canada. And she emailed me and she said, our school is closing. Can you send us 4 copies of the Inside Story? We want the teachers to be able to talk to the kids about the changes that they're going to go through. And then I spoke to her on Monday morning and I said, when do you want the books? And she said, by the end of the day on Tuesday. I thought, oh boy, how are we going to do this? So the wonderful warehouse people that I work with in Ohio, I called them and I said, can you get 4 books of the Inside Story to Ontario, Canada by tomorrow? And they said yes, and they did. So I was really excited about that. What the Inside Story is about, as I said, it's about change. You know, here is a little envelope who has never left his home. You figure, how long do they sit in boxes on a shelf? For years and years and years sometimes. One day he's pulled out, he's stuffed, he's written on, he's stamped, and he goes through the mail system. And he's petrified. And there's an example. Here he is. It's an example of one of the pictures. And you know, the terrific people that we do, who do my graphics, I said, and I learned this from Karen Lapine from Printer Square. Karen said to me, "You got to move the words around on the pages, Kathy." And so I said, I got to show movement. So you can see a big push whooshes me right out. I'm sliding down a chute. I'm in a noisy sound machine, too loud. I can't compute. And the post office guy could care less, but this poor guy has never left his home, this little envelope. I often speak to women's groups, and I was speaking at a women's group one day, and a woman emailed me afterwards, and she said she worked with dogs, and she asked if I would do a dog book. And I thought, no problem, because Callie, my dog, could be the star, and she would be, there's Callie up there, there's her 23-inch neck. Callie could speak for every dog. So we did the book Just Sniffing Around. What we did differently in this book is that each picture looks like a portrait. Cameron is also a portrait painter, so each picture looks like a portrait. And my friend Karen Smith found the Spencer family. They live in Manchester. Some of you may know them. And they came to my house, and Cameron took pictures to use as the background for his illustrations as a basis. And then I got a call from the mom, from Stephanie Spencer, a few days afterwards, and because we explained that the little girl in my books always has red hair. Now, Stephanie said, "My daughter Jillian is very upset." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because she won't look like herself. In the book, she's going to have red hair." So I thought, well, this is a problem, but we have to do it. All the girls, the little girl always has red hair. Well, I have to tell you, when the book came out, we were doing a book signing, Cameron and I, at Barnes & Noble, and little Jillian in first grade said, "Can I read the book? I want to read the book." So I think she got over it. You know, when you do a dog book, the cat people say, you got to do a cat book. You know, cat lovers really are very strong about their love of cats. And when I go to schools, I ask people, how many have dogs, how many have cats? And I'm sure if people raise their hands today, I'm sure I'd have a wide grouping for both of them. So the trouble is, I'm not really a cat person as much as I am a dog person, so I had to really check with my cat-loving friends. And also I thought, where are we going to find a star? I mean, Callie was the star for the dog book. Where are we going to find a star? So I was working out one day at the gym, and I thought to myself, we'll have a cat contest. People will send in pictures of their cats, and they'll donate to animal shelters. And I thought that would be win-win. And in all my books, when I have contests, I have a winner and 3 runners-up. So Cameron was going to be the judge, and we did the contest fairly locally because he said, in his wisdom, he said, the cat will come to Manchester for pictures. But obviously he wasn't thinking about cats because they don't travel well. So the winning cat is from Pennacook, and there is Charlie, the winning cat, and Cameron and the cat's mom sent pictures back and forth. And you see the title, Persnickety. It took forever for me to think of that title. I thought of a cat named Nan, a cat named Fran. I just couldn't. And one day, I just jumped up and I said, Persnickety. And that's how it's going to be spelled. You can see the purrs, and then snick, and then the kitty. So I'm really happy about that cover. And when we had the contest, I wanted people to join the contest, and I saw a couple of guys I knew. I said, do either of you have a cat? And one of them said, you got to listen closely, my dog Annie could win a cat contest. You got it? My dog Annie could win a cat contest. Well, that title became my idea for The Winner Is. And here's The Winner Is. And Jeff, And this is about a dog who's bored at home, no one's paying attention to him, and he sees a poster for a cat contest, and he says, I can do that. He has to make all of these changes. He has to learn to purr and meow. He has to get contact lenses. He goes to my hairdresser, Cynthia's Classic Cuts, and he gets a wig. And there's one line in there that says, cats, oh, Jeff, show the picture of the dog. This is we had a floppy-eared dog contest, and my dog Sophie was the poster girl for that. And this is the winning dog who won. His name is Gabriel. He hangs out at an auto body shop in Kentucky. And when I was in Hopkinton last year, and I showed that picture, all the kids said, we know that dog, we know that dog. And that's Gabriel. So, Jeff, turn back to, thanks. So, there's one line in The Winner Is that goes like this. Cats groom themselves, they lick all over. How will I learn? Here's Stover. I'll ask my friend Stover. There he is. And this was just going to be silly, because how silly is it for, to learn about grooming from a pig? And I just thought that would be silly. But as I tell the kids all the time, you got to listen to what people tell you. So a couple of people within a week of each other said to me, you have to do a book about Stover. So that's how Stover came into being. And there is Stover. Stover just came out. He arrived during that April 1st snowstorm, that really exciting snowstorm we had. And he's a hardy little pig. Stover is a fantastic pig because he has a secret life. He's very fit, he eats healthy foods, and he goes to the gym. And in this day and age, when everybody's talking about childhood obesity, Stover really knows the key to combating this. And I'd like to show a few slides from Stover. There is Stover doing spinning at the gym. Next slide. And there he is. It says, aerobics is peppy. It makes me sweat tons. Sometimes I do step class, which firms up my buns. Okay. And here he is stretching. I don't know if you can see Cameron. Cameron gave Stover the best expressions. And at Barnes & Noble, I was one day, one of the people came over to me and said, one of the people who works in the children's section, you really need to do a horse book. And I try to listen to what people tell me. So the next book is going to be called A Horse Named Special. And as Norm said, it's about a therapeutic riding horse. We had a contest again, and this is the winning horse. He's owned by a 12-year-old girl who lives in Raymond, and he's boarded in Chichester. You know, when I started writing 10 years ago, I had no idea where this would lead. I had no idea that at age 55, I would learn something new about myself. I'd learn something new that was really fun, something I couldn't imagine ever living without. I certainly had no idea I would find an illustrator in an Argentine tango class. I had no idea that a bent tree would lead to a book about diversity. You know, you never know where something will go. My books are seemingly simple, but their characters and stories all have important messages. In life, my mother used to tell me, it's all the little things. It's the little things that matter. The simple thoughts, the gestures, those are the things that mean the most. Sometimes we think we have to be all grown up. We have to be sophisticated and act adult. With my writing, I found that this really isn't the case. So I'd like to read a poem about that. It's called Just Hanging Out. There's a little kid inside all of us, quietly hanging out without a needed fuss. It's our playful side, the side with all the fun, the side that laughs a lot, away from anything glum. No matter what our age, no matter what we do, at work or when at home, our little kid comes through. Don't listen to the folk who tell us act your age. Whatever does that mean? They're not on our same page. Remember who came first, that little kid before, that serious older person was allowed inside our door. And you never know at what age. Did I read that already? I don't remember. No, I didn't. Okay. You never know at what age something new will happen that didn't exist. I certainly didn't. We all have to try new things. We need to stretch and get out of our comfort zones because that's how we learn. And that's how we learn new things about ourselves too. And remember, it's a good idea to let that little kid outside. Sorry, let me say it again. It's a good line. Remember, it's a good idea to let that little kid inside of you out every now and then. And I want to thank you all for having me here today as your speaker. It's really been great. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Speaking from the perspective of a grandfather whose twin grandsons will turn 6 next week, and by the way, of course, they're the most handsome, the smartest kids you can't even begin to imagine. But I've read quite a number of children's books over the last few years, Kathy, and have wondered a little bit how they came to be. And you certainly shed light on that for us this morning. We really appreciate you being here.